Welcome, everyone. My name is Lauren Spohn. I'm a senior at Harvard College studying English and history, and I am here to talk about faith, career, and how we should think about the future. This is an Instagram live conversation with Dr. Meghan Sullivan, part of the Veritas Forum's first ever senior week for the class of 2020. And so I know Dr. Sullivan's work by hearing her speak at the Augustine Collective Conference, I think 2 years in a row. So I am the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Ichthus, so it was a great honor and pleasure to hear her talk about everything from rational faith to the hiddenness of God and how we should think through these issues. So we're very excited to have Dr. Sullivan here to speak with us, to join in on this conversation. So thank you to her, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in. We're really excited to get started.
Thanks, Lauren. We're super proud of you guys. Part of what I'm sure everybody's been telling you this week, this historic class of 2020. It's exciting for me to get to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, great. Let's kick things off. So first of all, Dr. Sullivan, I think everyone in the Augustine Collective knows about your extremely popular course at Notre Dame, God and the Good Life. So I was hoping, and I think it's in your Instagram handle.
Yeah, that I'm on the GGL handle.
I was hoping that you could maybe talk to us a little bit about this course and what it is that's so attractive about it to students at Notre Dame year after year.
Yeah, sure. So you can totally check us out online at godinthegoodlife.nd.edu, or if you Google God in the Good Life, you can find the website. We try to share a bunch of our materials and part of the course experience with anybody who's interested. But the basic premise of the class is every Notre Dame student, every young person or person trying to get an education deserves the opportunity to spend some time seriously reflecting on the really big questions that face human life. The Greeks would have called this like care for the soul. We all deserve some time and help in our education and learning how to take care of ourselves. And that doesn't just mean like getting enough sleep or not eating a ton of gluten or exercising, like all the advice that we normally give people about care for themselves. That's all important advice, but this is more significant. Taking time, especially as you're a young adult, and thinking, why am I here? I've got, on average, maybe 79 years to live out my life. And by the time we meet these students, they're already 18, 19 years in. So you got 60 years left. What is it for you to have a meaningful life? What kind of goals are worth devoting your entire life to? How do moral considerations fit in the good life? I think a lot of us operate on this default assumption that our lives are morally perfect, or that we're generally doing the best that we can to be good neighbors and good citizens. But actually, the moral life is way more complicated than that. And we learn this as we start to live. So we want people to be thinking about the challenges that morality throws at us for living a good life. We also have students to think about the role that religious faith may or may not play in a good life. And these are questions, I think, also on a default setting, we think everybody just has to make up their own mind about, and then there aren't really better or worse answers. But the history of philosophy, at least the last 2,400 years of philosophy, is a challenge to that. We totally think that there are better and worse ways of thinking about these questions, and that there have been really smart people over the last couple millennia who have given guidance that other people have found really helpful. So this idea that taking care of yourself is something that you just have to figure out on your own, rather than the kind of thing that your education can help you with, is something that we try to push back on. We started the class 4 years ago. So right when you guys were freshmen, we just graduated. Our first group of GGLers just Zoom graduated, which is not how we thought it was going to happen. We planned this like really big nostalgic dinner with on the program for the dinner, it had closing ceremony, super emotional GGL slideshow, and we had to show the slideshow over Zoom. It's been a weird semester, but we've had over 1,800 students take the class since we started up, and now there are 4 or 5 other faculty that are involved in it in a given semester, and it's really been wonderful. It started off as kind of a big experiment for what would we do if the very first day of college we just looked out at an auditorium of hundreds of students and said, "Why are you here? And how are you going to make of what are you going to make of this life that you've got?" And it turns out that that kind of question is electric, and it's built a really wonderful community. So we're excited. We're very excited about the possibility too of teaching it in person again in the fall.
Yeah. Wow. So I was looking up the course online and I found the website, and you
Mhm.
guys have a fantastic course trailer for God and the Good Life that features,
Yeah,
is it Aquinas and Nietzsche like going at it in a fist fight?
a
I
fist fight. I think Nietzsche's got a box cutter in that video too, if you look closely,
Oh,
which is totally Nietzsche.
yeah, absolutely.
We've
Well,
gotten
something else.
emails. Oh, sorry. We've gotten emails that the guy
Yeah,
playing Aquinas, who is a real Dominican priest, is not
yeah.
fat enough.
Uh,
Real Aquinas was a really big guy, and a lot of people have sent us notes saying like our Aquinas is miscast. But we tried to get a real Dominican.
yeah. Well, you got to keep him in Nietzsche's weight class, right? If they're gonna have,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. But so something else that I really wanted to talk to you about, especially given sort of where we are, politically, socially, just sort of spiritually in this moment of crisis, is rational faith. So for seniors leaving college, right? We spent the past 4 years asking these big questions, trying to answer things on a first principles basis, and suddenly all the plans we had are just totally shot, right? We're entering a workforce of incredible unemployment stats. All our plans for the jobs, programs we had lined up are just sort of thrown for a loop. And this is on top of all of the tragedy that's been happening around the world, both first degree deaths from COVID-19, but also the sort of resulting tragedy, death, loss of life and livelihood that's come with the economic fallout following the virus. So, can you speak a little bit about like what does it mean to have rational faith? Do we need to have this? How do we approach this question of believing in God or some higher power when we see so much pain happening? And how does that tie to the way that we start to think about our lives moving forward, facing so much uncertainty?
This has been top of my mind, especially this past week. We had Notre
Yeah.
Dame's graduation was last weekend, and so students. One thing God in the Good Life has done is that first group of students are some of the undergraduates I've been closest to in my entire career. So we've been reflecting a lot on them graduating. Also, my youngest brother is a senior at Brown. So he's part of your guys' graduating
Wow.
class, and his
Yeah.
graduation was supposed to be this weekend. It's canceled. We're never
Mm.
going to get like those family pictures.
Yeah.
His job for next year got canceled. So it's a family issue for us. And it's hard. One, I'm mindful. It's easy for people like me who have a pretty stable job and you've had like already the time to set up my adult life to give you guys advice like it's going to be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry so much. Yeah, it's so easy for you to say, Sullivan, as you sit in your house with your job. It's still
Yeah.
happening. Um, so I'm mindful of the fact that some of this, like, well, you guys are in a tough spot,
Yeah.
and you are, in many respects, going to be a historic graduating class. It's facing massive uncertainty and entering a world that, no matter what, is going to be rapidly changed by what's happening.
Yeah.
And I don't take that glibly or think that somebody in my position has the best practical advice to give you. Oh, well, you should never take practical advice from a philosophy professor either. Um, but I can give you philosophical advice. I can
Yeah.
give you existential advice. That's literally my job. Um, and I think on that front, uh, there might be a silver lining for you guys. I don't think there's never an easy time to be setting out in the world. I mean, life is just difficult. And I think sometimes at universities, we do a disservice to our students by setting up these kind of false idols of safety and security that pretty quickly let you down, even in
Yeah.
good times. So we say, like, well, if you get this fancy scholarship, or if you get this job at this prestigious consulting firm or in Silicon Valley, and you keep this friend group and you don't eat gluten and you exercise every day, get enough sleep, you're gonna have the good life. That's not None of that's true. Those
Yeah.
are all things that'll help you like day to day, week to week, be a happier person in some sense. But the hard work that everybody in every generation has to do when they're in your situation is to start to really understand the goal that you really love and care about that's going to be the kind of guiding star for your life. And all
Yeah.
the stuff we've told you to go for in college, it's a lie. It's not like it's all good stuff, but it's not the good. It's not like why
Yeah.
you're here on earth. And
Yeah.
so you guys are in an interesting situation because in like, you know, the graduating class last year or the year before, it's pretty hard to resist the temptation of thinking you've got everything set if you've got a job lined up and a couple good friends to walk down the lawn with. But that's never been true, and at least you guys have a realistic picture of the fact that that those are ephemeral and contingent goals, and that there are bigger things that you need to be aiming at that are more secure and more life-giving and more fulfilling. And so at the very least, like, you're going to get a head start on people who have to have their midlife crisis in their early 30s.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah. I can't help but think of like the problem of induction that goes all the way
Yeah.
back to Hume, right? Or something
Mm-hmm.
like Bertrand Russell's chicken, the chicken who feels so safe and secure in the coop, right? And then
Yeah.
doesn't realize that, dinner one night comes. And so life could be good. And then all of a sudden, just because thinking that life was good yesterday means that life is going to be good tomorrow, works all the way up until the farmer gets hungry for chicken for dinner one night, then
Yeah.
finally, cooks
Or
the chicken.
I mean, people have been experiencing this these past couple months differently. I certainly talk a lot. One of my colleagues who lives next door is the guy that brought me his coffee. But we have philosophical
Yeah.
conversations almost every day. Um, Life is good, and I don't know. Depending on people's family circumstances and mental health circumstances, folks have experienced this disruption differently. But I think one thing that's hit me very close to home is realizing, like, even if you take away all of the other stuff, if all your trips get canceled and your
Yeah.
job ends up looking really different, you still wake up every morning and realize, like, man, I'm so grateful to be alive. I'm so grateful to be in this, like, well-ordered world. And food tastes a little bit sweeter. I think you maybe get a little bit more perspective too on what you really love, and especially once the distractions are removed.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you're talking about sort of tasting food for the first time and really enjoying the
Yeah.
sweetness, right, of coffee or whatever it might be.
Oh my gosh,
It
it's so good.
reminds
This is
me,
my third Starbucks since March. It's so
yeah,
good.
that's awesome. Well, it reminds me of something else that I wanted to ask you about, which is your most recent book, where you focus a lot on time biases, right? And this
Yeah.
idea that, we kind of, it's interesting because we think so much about how, if you look at, say, our investing principles, right? If we're going to calculate the return on investment, we're always thinking that a dollar tomorrow is going to be worth a lot less than a dollar worth today, right? And this is something that I've thought a lot about in college is we're always kind of hedging our bets based on the value of time now versus later. I'm going to study now. I'm going to forego, going out with my friends. So I'll get more enjoyment of whatever benefit I get from studying now than I would from, taking time off now. Even planning for retirement. So I wonder if you could explain for our viewers a bit more about the idea or the theory that you developed in your most recent book of time neutrality. And what does that mean? And how can it help us think about planning for the future in such uncertain times?
Yeah, so that book, I'm very interested in time. I started off my
Yeah.
career looking at very abstract questions involving time. So, like, if you wanted to program a computer to reason well about time or to mimic our logic, how would you do it? And a few years ago, I got much more interested in the connection between philosophy and psychology, and rationality, and the ways that time affects our ethical lives, and time affects our views about whether we're living the good life and whether or not we're behaving rationally. And the view that I defend in that book, a lot of us think it's totally rational. Pause. It's totally rational to take uncertainty into account when you're making decisions for the future. So if you have the option for, like, a pretty good sure thing, like a pretty solid job that you'll almost certainly get versus a really risky job that might be incredible, it's totally fine for you to take the risk into account. Certainly when you're investing in the stock market, you should
Right.
take
Yeah.
risk into account.
Absolutely.
But a lot of us don't just take, and the future has always got a bit of uncertainty in it. But a lot of us are also procrastinators. So we let it, even once we've calculated all the probabilities, we're very happy to delay things we're not looking forward to and rush things that we are looking forward to. I'm also very interested in this more philosophical question about how we think about our past, or more importantly, how we
Yeah.
don't think at all about our past, especially young folks. it seems like the only thing that exists in your life is the future. It's the next thing. You're always, getting ready for the next hilltop that you're trying to climb. Um, but that we know is ultimately going to let us down near the end of our lives when we start to realize that we don't have that much future left.
Yeah.
It lets us down. It turns out in times of pandemic where you have this really beautiful laid out future. Like I don't know if you had this phenomenon, but I remember like looking at my Google Calendar that second week in March, and it had like colored blocks all over it. I was supposed to take like 8 trips, and you just watched in the course of 10 days as they just disappeared, and
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
this feeling of like the future is just evaporating. And then the follow-on question is like, well, gosh, all the things that give my life value are going away. These things I was looking
Yeah.
forward to that were like my obsessions are gone. So the theory of temporal neutrality, obviously you should buy the book. There's lots of details to it, but it gives us a little bit of resources for taking a step back and thinking about ourselves in those moments when, like, with the near, so much of our psychology is oriented towards the near future. So, like, the
Yeah.
next year of my life is the thing that just seems like my whole world. And temporal neutrality says, well, why is that? Like, if a really exciting trip to Texas gets rescheduled for 2 years from now, you're still going to get that trip. Like, that's still going to be you that goes on the trip, that still gets the achievement. It's just going to happen a little bit
Yeah.
further away. Or
Yeah.
I've been reading, my poor students have had like this crash course on stoicism inflicted on them, because one of the ways that I coped with the pandemic was I gathered up all of my Roman philosophy books and just locked myself in my house and read about
That's great.
stoicism. But the Stoics talk about this all the time. The Stoics are obsessed with death. They think that philosophy, one of the main roles of philosophers is helping us all cope with the fact that we're eventually going to die. And
Yeah.
they have some beautiful advice for what to do when your future gets disrupted, presumably gets disrupted by like the threat of death. But they say, like folks like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca say, you've still got all of these amazing memories and experiences in your past that probably you neglected the first time around. But now,
Mm.
if you've got some time and you don't have like nearby pressing concerns for the future, one of the things that you could do is enjoy yourself. Like go back and revisit moments of your life that seem profoundly meaningful and reflect on them. You can, if you're a Christian, none of the Stoics are Christians, but at least not these guys. But if you're a Christian, you can pray through them too. So you think about like some like the examen prayer. I've been talking to a
Yeah.
friend about that quite a bit recently. But you go back through these moments of your day or previous moments of your life, and you revisit them and think like, where was God in those moments? Where were people loving me in those moments? What was like the deeper significance for my life in those moments? Um, and that's also a way of being temporally neutral, saying like your past is still yours, and these parts of your life that are already behind you are still something that are worth revisiting and cherishing, especially if you've now got the time to contemplate them. So, anyway, that's a long answer, but y'all should
Yeah.
buy the book. The book starts off with like it starts off with a lot of stuff on really simple economics and the time
Yeah.
value of money and calculating interest, but into the big existential questions near the last couple chapters. The last chapter is about nihilism. My mom told me it was really depressing.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah.
but these questions, I think they can all fit together, and time is certainly on everybody's mind right now.
Yeah. That's interesting. It does strike me that, maybe even reading literature is a kind of temporal neutrality, right? It does kind of transport us back into moments of the past, and it gives us a way of sort of halting the passing of a moment and sort of exploring all angles of whatever's happening, the kind of careful dynamics of I'm reading Virginia Woolf right now, which is why this
Yeah,
is kind of on my mind, right? But it is amazing. Maybe to treat our lives more like literature as we're going back and trying to relive these moments and ask like, what is the scene? What is the detail? That's cool. I'm
yeah.
gonna
And how
try.
is it all fitting
Yeah,
together?
yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, I think another question that I'd love to sort of pick your brain on. Um, how would you recommend for seniors moving forward how we should think about like success and self-worth in times like this when we're all sort of struggling to, not only find our way in these kind of crashing, uncertain worlds, but also like if you have any advice, maybe from your own experience of times when you had to really kind of sit back and redefine how you were going to think about success coming out of college and what that meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no easy time to graduate
Right.
college.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely found this to be a really disruptive and difficult couple of years. Um, Thinking about it now, this is a great question. I think we we like to pretend that if you're a really strong person, you can get your sense of self-worth like from yourself. Like, just ignore the haters,
Right.
and ignore the distractions and really know who you are, and let that be your kind of guide. And I think that's a mistake. There's a reason why we care so much what our friends think of us and why we want to be in relationship with other people. There's a reason why we care like what God thinks of us and that we want to be in relationship with God. We are inherently social creatures. That doesn't mean that you should let like the fad of the hour dictate your self-worth, or
Yeah.
Instagram dictate your self-worth. But it does mean that like we got to be honest that we're meant to be dependent and in relation with other people, and so we should be having these conversations about our lives with other people who we trust and love and who we know love us. And so I think, especially in really disruptive times of your life, like what you guys are all facing,
Yeah.
it's a time to really turn and lean on these people who care about you. Your parents are the most obvious examples, and family members, but also I suspect these teachers in college who've made a tremendous investment in you. The people who are now taking risks on you. So if you've got a job or if you're going on to more school, there are people you're about to meet who are already really invested in your life. And I think you should have an advisory committee. You shouldn't let like one person. You should never let one person just dictate this answer
Yeah.
for you. But you should be like making yourself vulnerable and having these questions, having these conversations with people about like what would be the best way for me to spend the next 10 years of my life. What do you think about this big decision that I'm about to make? Or I don't have any decisions to make. What would you do if you were in my shoes?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that sometimes that can take a little bit of the pressure off of us to try to figure everything else out for ourselves, which we just can't do. None of us are capable of doing that. And when I look back, I graduated 15 years ago from
Yeah.
University of Virginia. So this would have been my 15th reunion if reunions were still happening. um, but I think about that period in my life, and many of the big decisions I made just trusting faithfully in the advice of other people that I didn't really understand at the time. Like the decision to go to grad school, I knew I really liked philosophy and reading books, but I didn't know anything about what grad school was. It was more teachers that really cared about me and were willing to kind of push me a little bit and give me that nudge that got me onto that track. Every big
Oh,
decision in life, my
yeah.
current job has been like, just kind of trusting faithfully in people who I know love me. And I think that approach, I don't know, it served me well. And it definitely takes a little bit of the pressure off of you for knowing even who you are at this point, because you guys are still works in progress.
Yeah, aren't we all? Gosh. Well, if we could take maybe a stoic moment to kind of
Yeah.
go back and travel back in the past and sort of pick out particular times that I'd be interested to hear for you, looking back on your career now, 15 years out from graduation. Can you pinpoint any specific moments where you really felt like your own sort of first principle answer to a lot of the questions you ask and God and the Good Life changed or was challenged in a way that led to a kind of productive change in course or strengthening? I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, I get this question a lot from students because we spend a lot of
Yeah.
time reading Socrates and Plato, who are all about like always change your mind in response to new evidence, be flexible, and
Yeah.
I'm like the least flexible person. um, I think of big ones. My values, like I feel in many ways I'm the same person I was like my sophomore year of college. That was a huge year. I'm not the
Yeah.
same person I was my freshman year of college, but my second year of college I changed really rapidly, and I don't know, what it was like Holy Spirit or the right developmental milestone or something. But many of the things that I really came to love when I was 20 still are things that I absolutely love now, like philosophy, Christianity,
Mm.
Legos,
Oh,
exercising. um, big changes. If you'd told me when I was in the middle of graduate school that looking 10 years into your first job, you're going to be focused a lot more on philosophy of religion. Teaching is going to take up 40 hours of your week on a good week.
yeah.
You'll have gone to a bunch of the really like fancy conferences, but you won't really go to as many of them anymore because you won't want to, but you will like to like spend a lot of time on campus doing things. I think I would have been disappointed. I would have said like, no, I had this vision in my head about what made for an amazing academic career, which meant like not doing a lot of teaching, publishing journal articles in certain places, um, doing
Yeah.
these really abstract topics in
Mhm.
metaphysics that seem really hard. And I've changed course with that quite a bit, and I'm very proud to have done it. But anyways, that's not a great. That's not like this like St. Paul getting hit by lightning kind of moment. It's more just like you settle into a way of life, like you settle into a particular vocation, and then the stuff that you originally grabbed onto of thinking makes you a good philosopher, doctor, lawyer, consultant. After a little while, as you grow into it, you realize what it is to really be good at those jobs, and it's very different
Yeah.
than when you first started off. And I think that's absolutely true. I think I guess a value I didn't realize I had until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Academia is a really individualistic job. So you decide most of the time decisions about whether you're hired or fired all depend on your resume and how good your credentials are and how famous you are. It's all about you. In fact, you don't get very far unless you have a really big ego and you're kind of like a narcissist at universities. I don't know if you guys notice this about any of your college professors, but that's like totally true.
Yeah.
And 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that you can do so much more if you're really, really collaborative. Like if you really are willing to work with other people, which means sharing everything, even stuff that's not typically shared. So like writing instead of writing a book by yourself, which is what almost every philosopher does, writing a book with like a really good friend. Instead of teaching by yourself, teaching with four other people and having constant arguments about that come with it. But sharing your life with students, like instead of deciding
Yeah.
that the faculty member decides what the class curriculum is going to be like, instead posing the question to students that have just taken the class, and just trying to like make other people as involved as possible in every activity. That's something I've realized is something that's deeply valuable that I just didn't like. It wasn't even on my radar before. But I haven't
Yeah.
changed my mind about any big stuff. If anything, I've kind of dug in because I've gotten a little bit smarter. So, like, I've talked about this before with Veritas folks. Like, when I was in grad school, I never really talked about my religious life, even though my Christian faith was like incredibly important to me in grad school, and it was something that I
Yeah.
thought about all the time, and I had very close community around. But I just never let it influence my academic life because I was worried that people would make fun of me, and I didn't have really smart
Yeah.
things to say about it.
Yeah.
Like I feel a lot more confident in my ability to have intelligent discussions with people about it, and my life has gotten a lot more integrated on that front. But yeah, big things. Trying to think of other things I've changed my mind about. This is embarrassing for a
Yeah.
philosopher to like not, yeah. Trying
No,
to think
I
of like
think that's
political
fantastic.
questions or something.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we are unfortunately nearing the end of our time, but I want to end on a slightly lighter note, if you're
Sure.
okay with. So this is something I noticed on your website that you're a fan of not only Legos but also sci-fi, science
Yeah.
fiction. So I was like, what could I ask Dr. Sullivan? And I was thinking, I will name a famous philosopher, and then
Hmm.
you tell us what character from either Star Wars or Star Trek that philosopher would be in an alternate universe. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right.
All right, let's go for
So
it. I hope
I
I know the
figured.
philosophers.
Oh, oh yeah. No, no worries
That's
about
their easy
that.
ones. I feel like this is like my oral exam.
I think we have to start at the classics. So I'd say Plato and Aristotle, if you had to choose.
Plato, Darth Vader, Aristotle, Luke Skywalker. Keep going.
Wow.
Plato's
Easy.
dark. I love Plato, and Plato is redeemed. Plato's absolutely redeemed in some of the dialogues, but Plato's a bit ruthless.
Wow, that's okay. Very good. Okay, let's go with Aquinas.
Ooh, Thomas Aquinas. Like my initial
yeah.
My like initial inclination is somebody like Boba Fett, so just like because he travels around and he's like a great synthesizer and he's all over the place. But Aquinas has something to say about literally everything, and Boba Fett's very quiet, so it's not really good fit. But Boba Fett's always like collecting stuff. Like he's going around and he's a bounty hunter and he's picking up like his different bounties. And Aquinas is Aquinas is like a raccoon. Like any kind of shiny thing that he sees, he grabs it.
That's awesome. Okay, two more. Nietzsche.
And we already used up Darth Vader. Nietzsche wishes he was Vader. Nietzsche's like Anakin Skywalker and like Phantom Menace. So just kind of annoying, like evil, but kind of trying too hard.
Yeah. Okay, what about Kierkegaard? We can maybe end on this one. End with the leap.
I would go with like Yoda for Kierkegaard. Like everything he says seems really profound, and then you pause on it for a second, and you're just like, I don't know if I totally got that, or I don't know how it's all fitting together. I'm really glad that this is happening. That's how I go with Kierkegaard. Like I'm really glad you're writing this. I don't totally get it, and I'm not sure if it's my fault or yours.
Yeah, I mean, some of the syntax is confusing, so Yoda does seem to hit on that too. So
and not afraid to make it up as you go along.
Dr. Sullivan, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Congratulations, guys.
We really appreciate it.